Douglas Herbert joins us. Doug, good evening to you.
Mark.
Jeff Sessions almost seemed to be, to coin a phrase, on borrowed time, even as he was appointed in February 2017.
I mean, Trump has had Sessions in the crosshairs almost since the appointment. You're right. I mean, what Sessions, the original sin, if you will, that Sessions committed was he recused himself from the Russia inquiry early last year. And why did he do that? He did that after the Washington Post published a report that Sessions had been in contact with the then Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. He didn't want to have the appearance of any sort of conflict of interest as the head of the Justice Department, the one who would oversee a special prosecutor, anyone investigating this. He recused himself. You could say whatever you think of Jeff Sessions, you could say at least he did the morally right thing.
It seems like the right thing to do.
Exactly. So that was his original sin. But since then, Donald Trump has really been vitriolically on the attack, lambasting this guy on Twitter, in public, in speeches, at rallies. He's called him weak. He said he was never in control of the Justice Department. At one point, he called him Mr. Magoo after the cartoon character you might know.
Yeah.
Sessions has given as good as he got. You know, he said he has been in control of the Justice Department from the day he was sworn in. And he hung on for a long while. Donald Trump basically grabbed a window of opportunity here. He knows that come January, you're going to have a Senate there, newly in control majority, at least in the House, a Senate which will be able to sort of, if not fight back forcefully, at least ask him questions, awkward questions from which Donald Trump was ring-fenced until now by a Republican-controlled majority in both houses of Congress. The man he's appointed, we saw him in that report there. This is a guy who spoke to CNN shortly before he was appointed as the senior aide to Sessions, a deputy, basically said that the Mueller inquiry should have less funding, they should cut the funding, and that he should be basically reined in. This is a man who is publicly on the record in the U.S. Media as saying he believes Mueller has already overstepped or transcended his limits. Is that the man that can be honestly seen as overseeing a fair and impartial Mueller inquiry? That's why you hear the calls right now, Mark. People saying Mueller should be able to be allowed to complete his work unimpeded. He should not have any sort of pressure or someone breathing down his back. And there's a lot of calls for Whitaker himself to recuse himself, as Jeff Sessions did.
Indeed, and that would obviously sort of repeat the sin in the eyes of Donald Trump. And just to remind people, of course, the Mueller inquiry, the investigation into the alleged
Russian collusion.
He would drop alleged. Russian collusion,
exactly.
Russian collusion or interference or some kind of meddling in the 2016 presidential
Plus the
election
firing
in
of
favor
James.
of Trump.
Plus the firing of James Comey. Let's not forget that, the former FBI director. That is become an element. You know, you could say sometimes Trump becomes his own worst enemy in these things. He's created a whole nother element to this investigation by firing the former FBI director, raising concerns about obstruction of justice, conflict of interest. It's unprecedented firing an FBI director.
Because it looks to the independent observer, and I class myself as one of them, that what he's doing is merely removing anybody who's getting in the way of what he wants or what he believes or what he says.
He's been open about this. It's about loyalty to him. This was another big charge of
regardless of justice.
This is not about the special prosecutor being able to do his job unhindered by the chief executive. This is about Donald Trump taking personal blows and having a vendetta against anyone that he sees as betraying his trust. This is about a personal loyalty to Donald Trump. If you break that, if you breach that loyalty, that allegiance, you are guilty of committing a sin against Donald Trump. It doesn't matter what your job is, what your constitutional duty may be. That is how Donald Trump sees it. That's about how most of Donald Trump's supporters see it as well. They buy into his narrative. They also see Robert Mueller. They see the journalists who report on the Mueller inquiry. They see this as all part of that vendetta, that broader vendetta against Donald Trump to bring down Donald Trump, that there's some conspiracy against him.
No wonder we have a growing audience in the States. Doug, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator.